the sort of radiance is starting to shine through. I hope so. Anyway, I hope you're having a good retreat and feeling some of the effects of it. So before I carry on talking more, let's just settle and have a 5-10 minute meditation where I'll just guide us into our bodies. Not least because it's just helpful to arrive into the session, but also so that we can start to connect with our inner life, this life of consciousness. So making sure you're comfortable. And see if you can have a sense of groundedness by coming into the body, by bringing awareness into the body, and particularly to those points of contact the body makes with the seat and with the floor, the ground, and the sitting bones against the chair, the weight dropping down through those sitting bones, through your feet. And imagine that weight falling down into the earth. Sinking deeper and deeper into the earth, letting the earth support the weight of the body. And as you breathe out, following the out breath and seeing if you can let go of tension in the body, any holding on in the body. Imagining that also flowing, melting down into the earth. Softening the face. Seeing if you can let go in the shoulders a little bit more. And bringing awareness down into the legs. Seeing if you can have a sense of the muscles in the legs softening and letting go in the legs. and imagining a sense of spaciousness within you, within the mind, and also space around you. Imagining a vast blue sky all around, in all directions. Infinite space, clear, pristine, radiant space all around. Vast blue sky. And we can let go into that blue sky. It's not different from us, not separate from us. Not only is the sky pristine and radiant, it's also full of metta. So as we let go into the sky, we also let go into love, into metta. And then coming back to a sense of yourself and your body, but see if you can stay connected with a sense of metta, a sense of spaciousness, even as you come back to the body and to yourself. And then when you feel ready, coming out of the meditation, opening your eyes. Good. Very good. Okay, so here we are again. So this morning I want to explore a little bit more about how we might work to experience the radiance, how we might practice to transform our minds into um, into this radiant, expansive consciousness. That's going to be the main sort of flavor of this morning. Can you hear me all right, by the way? Can you? Yeah, good. So yes, the point is whatever model, and this is only one model that I've introduced you from the Yogacara, whatever model we use, there are other models, and the Buddha didn't particularly use any elaborate models. He just, as I said in the Pabhasara Sutta, said this mind was luminous, and but it's covered over with adventitious defilements. That's a very simple kind of model. And then the Yogacara sort of makes that more, unpacks that a bit more and develops it a bit more. But whatever model you use, the main thing to remember is that there's more. There's more to our minds than we normally might imagine. There's more to consciousness than our ordinary sense experience may lead us to think. In a sense, there's also more to the world than we might ordinarily imagine. As we change our consciousness, the world we experience changes. And Buddhism is primarily concerned with experience, in a sense. It's not concerned with what's out there independently of our experience of the world. It's saying if we change our consciousness, the world also changes. And we don't really know what's out there independently of our consciousness anyway, or even if there is something out there independently of our consciousness. So when we change our mind, the world changes. It becomes more radiant if we develop a more radiant mind. If we develop complete freedom from all delusion of separateness and self-centeredness, then the world is transformed for us. But we can't do that all in one go. The important thing is that it's possible, but unfortunately, it's not just something that you can make happen. You can't just move into the luminosity. You can't just do that. We have to, in a way, change the conditions of our life and change our actions and transform the alia. Do you remember the relative alia had these seeds in it? Do you want to see the picture again? I'll show you the picture again, just because I can. Oh, no, I can't. I can't actually share my screen unless Kamlanaga does his magic to allow me to share my screen. Kamlanaga's done his magic. I can show you the picture one more time. So in that relative alia, you've got all these seeds, which are impressions from our actions, past and present. And if we want to, in a way, allow this radiance to come through, we have to keep planting positive seeds into the alia. And then eventually what happens through practice is it's like the alia turns upside down and inside out. It's said that there's a turning about in the deepest seat of consciousness, which is this alia. It turns inside out, upside down, and it's like the radiance just breaks through completely. Eventually, it just becomes a continuous radiance. Until that point, our practice might allow more and more glimpses of it. But there comes a point when it just breaks through completely. But I'm not going to say more about that just yet. I'll come back to that later on. But now, for now, what I want to focus on is that we do need to practice. And one way of thinking about practice is the threefold path. So many of you will be familiar with the threefold path. It's a model, a formulation of the path that the Buddha emphasized again and again, and particularly in the last year of his life. He visited as many of his disciples as he could on foot. He sort of did a grand tour and kept emphasizing this threefold path of sila, ethics, samadhi, meditation, prajna, wisdom. Ethics, meditation, and wisdom. Sila, samadhi, prajna. Sila, samadhi, prajna. He kept emphasizing that. And in a way, they're cumulative, they're linear, they build on each other. You have a foundation of ethics, which allows meditation to go deeper and to become more effective. And then on the basis of an effective samadhi or meditation practice, you can allow wisdom teachings, the reflections that we've been doing about the nature of consciousness are wisdom teachings, you could say. And those wisdom teachings go deeper into we realize them more deeply on the basis of meditation. So there's a sort of ethics, meditation, wisdom. There are levels, but I prefer to think of it as a spiral path, and that's how Bhante teaches of it. Because it's not that you ever get to the end of ethics, and you never get to the end of meditation. They just build. So as you develop more ethics and meditation and wisdom, you become more ethical, and then meditation goes deeper, and then there's more realization, and then more ethics emerges more naturally, more metta emerges more naturally. There's a spiral that just continues. And our ethical life, our sila, our ethical life, what it does is it loosens up some of the sense of self that we have. This sense that we're a fixed and separate self starts to loosen up when we act with more generosity and more metta, when we realize more and more deeply that other people are not really that different to us. And then more deeply still, we realize that they're the same as us, essentially. And then more deeply still, we realize that there's really, at a fundamental level of mind, there's no separation at the level of Alio, at the deepest level. There's really no separation. There's a connection with all of life. There's a connection with the whole of this phenomenal world. So ethics starts to loosen up that tightly held sense of separate selfhood. Samadhi takes that further. So we work directly on our mental activity. We work directly on the mental states that arise from this sense of separate selfhood, the craving, the ill will, the pride, the sort of sense of egocentricity. We work on that directly in meditation, and we undermine those negative tendencies still further. And what it does is meditation, samadhi, makes the mind more malleable, more pliable, more receptive to wisdom teachings, where with prajna we reflect that the sense of self is a construction, and our sense of an objective out there world is a construction, in the way that I've been trying to introduce us to, or remind us of, that we live in this construction that is really deluded. We take the construction for reality. And on the basis of a mind that's made pliable with meditation, that teaching, the wisdom teaching, can become a realization. It's like the penny can drop. There can be an aha moment of, oh, I see the truth of this. In my own experience, I see the truth of it. It stops being a theoretical teaching and becomes a lived realization. And then the mind opens up. And what typically happens is that you get this expansion of mind, you get this insight perhaps into the truth, but then the force of our habits come back in and close us down again, and we forget again. And then we have to work, do some more work, and we keep on repeating that. We keep on repeating that. Now, at some point, those openings up become more and more frequent. They become more and more, we become more and more accustomed to them. They become more frequent. And of course, enlightenment would be when they become continuous. When there's prajna in its fullness. So yes, ethics, meditation, and wisdom are a way of working to unleash this radiance. Actually, it's said that at death, consciousness will shine forth. All the radiance will shine out automatically. When the body dies, we'll encounter, in that very first moment of death, we'll encounter this incredible, bright, clear light of reality, which is also the reality of our own mind. We'll encounter it. It'll flash forth, but unless we're used to it, unless we're familiar with it, unless we know what's happening, it'll be overwhelming, and we'll shrink back from it. We won't be able to handle it, and in fact, it'll probably be very, very brief. Unless we're very familiar with it, we won't have an opportunity to really experience it for more than a fraction of a second. But if we have become familiar with it, like through practice in this life, then when it shines forth, we'll recognize it. We'll recognize it as the deepest aspect of our own mind, of our own consciousness, and of the deepest aspect of reality. And if we can do that, and if we can recognize it, that is, we've got the opportunity of letting go into it. A bit like I was in, just in that very brief meditation, I was saying, see if you can let go into this vast, clear blue sky. If we can let go into it at the moment of death, then we'll have reached enlightenment. So in a sense, you could say that our practice in this life is a practicing for that moment of death. If we can't let go into it, what happens is, well, I won't go into the whole theory of what happens, but eventually what happens is that we can't handle reality breaking through, and we shrink back into wanting this identity, a sense of me, which is after all what the habit has been. And then the force of that shrinking back propels us into a new life, into a new body, into a new form. The winds of our previous karma also affect what sort of form we'll take, how we'll be born, where we'll be born. But that's a bit of an aside. That after death state is a bit of an aside. I want to come back to this life and practicing in this life. So we've said Sila Samadhi Prajna. One of the effects of practice is that you start to experience this expansive state of mind more often. When you do, well, our experience can change in a number of ways. So, for example, yesterday we started talking about beauty and aesthetics, and the world can start to shine with, it can start to look more beautiful. Even the unbeautiful can start to look more beautiful. It's not that just the, conventionally beautiful things like snow or sunsets or flowers or trees or mountains look more beautiful. Even the unbeautiful can start to look more beautiful. I have this experience living in Bethnal Green, which isn't that beautiful. And, if I'm in touch with this expansiveness, or to the degree that I am, even this sort of urban, rather gritty environment and all the people within it can start to shine a little bit more. So it's not just that, it's conventionally beautiful things. There's a sort of radiance that just shines out of everything. And coupled with that, there's a sense of metta. As I was saying earlier, that instead of radiance, I could have used metta as the term. So we feel the life in things. We start to feel that everything is pulsating with the same life. So even when there are people that we dislike, or we find, people who are unskillful, people do horrendous things, don't they? We can still start to see, that even in those beings, the life that's pulsing is the same life that's in us. It's like everything wants to express itself. Everything wants to grow. And sometimes what happens is that growth is thwarted, or it becomes perverted into unskillful, self-centered, evil, even ways. But everything is pulsating with the same life. We start to have a sense of that in other human beings, not just in human beings. That manifests then in the sphere of how we relate to each other, in our communication with each other. Sometimes communication can take us much deeper beyond, chit-chat, into another sort of state of mind that is, as I was saying the other day, is a sort of state of mind beyond me and the person I'm communicating with. There's a sort of positive self-forgetting on both sides, and communication can open up a doorway beyond into this into reality. That starts to happen more. I mean, that might sound all very highfalutin, but you've probably had this sense that since you've started practicing and since you've come into the Sangha, you can have deeper communications with people. Do you have that sense? I mean, I used to sometimes have sort of meaningful communication with people before I started practicing, but it was rare, and it was often down the pub. And there would be this point where we were all sort of drunk enough to open up about how we really felt. But it was a really fine line, because you drank a little bit more and you just started talking gibberish, and it was just sentimental twaddle. I've always loved you. And, uh, you know, it was just a very, very sort of fine line and rather a rare occurrence. But you come into the Sangha, and I think what you can find is that you can talk about deeper things, about meaningful things. You can also have a laugh with people. You know, I live with 9 other guys in a community above the Buddhist center, and much of the time we're just bantering and joshing and teasing each other affectionately and having a laugh. And then very, very quickly, if somebody has something that's on their mind that's of more import, everybody sort of is receptive to that, and you can have immediately uh, a conversation that goes much deeper. And you can feel that change in the atmosphere, can't you? You can feel that when that happens. Um, so if you're in touch with practice, that's more accessible to you. That's what I'm trying to say. That's just more accessible to you more of the time, and you don't need uh, the alcohol or the psychedelics in order to experience that. Bante was very much, uh, if you ever had spent time with Bante, and of course you can't physically meet him now, um, you'd go to see him, I'd go to see him, and he'd just he was just very sort of friendly and ask you about yourself and what you've been, well, he'd say, you know, what have I been reading and all the rest of it. And we could talk about anything. The last time I saw him, we talked about, well, I'd been to see a play about Mary Queen of Scots and Elizabeth I and the rivalry and between the two queens. And so I brought that up, and of course, then we just went into you know, we started talking about Mary Queen of Scots. He knew more about everything um, than I did. Um, uh, Maybe not about physics, but actually towards the end of his life, he'd started even reading about physics and things, and he could talk about anything really. But uh, you got this sense that his mind was vast beneath that. And then well, the last time I saw him, we were talking about Mary Queen of Scots, and then I, at one point towards the end of the conversation, I just said to him, Bante, I want to ask for your blessings. I was about to go on a long 6-month solitary retreat, and I said, I want to ask for your blessings. And suddenly, the whole conversation, the atmosphere, just plunged into depth and a sense of importance. I can't. It was just weightier, but not in a heavy, not in a unpleasant way. And he just looked at me very, very directly. He couldn't see very much, but he looked at me very directly. And we moved from Mary Queen of Scots to blessings, and he gave me his blessings. Well, what he said was, well, you've definitely got my blessings, Jnanavaca, and you've had them in the past, and you'll have them in the future. And he emphasized each word. And suddenly Mary Queen of Scots was just nowhere. Do you know what I mean? And who cares anyway? And we were in a different mode. Well, you can do that more if you have been practicing. Um, Communication can take you beyond selfhood. Also, what happens is if you practice Sila Samadhi Prajna, you you you're drawn not just to beauty and to goodness, but also to truth. Um, there's this response to value, to truth. Well, values expressed in all sorts of ways, like beauty and goodness, but also values expressed to truth. You truth in every sense of the word, from a simple kind of honesty, but more also what I mean is to truth about the nature of reality. You're drawn to what's really true in the world, in life, in human beings. and also dharmic truths become more meaningful for you. I mean, they make sense more. And as you sort of experience more of beauty and friendship and communication and the truth, the dharmic truth, in a way, what happens is your practice um, is what's the word? It's redoubled. It's accelerated. So then this whole path of ethics, meditation, and wisdom is reinforced. So ethics, meditation, and wisdom, practicing that allows you to experience more beauty and friendship and real communication and a response to value. But then that response has a positive effect on your practice. There's a sort of virtuous spiral that builds. So you're more likely to then act skillfully and your meditation will be more effective, and this expansive mind becomes more accessible to you. But it takes effort. It's not going to happen automatically, because remember the manas, um, the habitual tendencies that are manifest in that manas, in the delusion that there's a fixed and separate me, and all our self-centeredness that comes from that delusion, that goes very, 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 very deep as well. I love this model because this, at the deepest level, you've just got this pristine, radiant, pure awareness. So that's who we really are. But also the model acknowledges that through lifetimes of ignorance and self-centeredness, we've got this very deep-seated tendency to ignorance and to selfishness through lifetimes, and that's what the manas represents. So on the one hand, it's saying that we really need to practice. We really, really need to make an effort, because it's not going to happen automatically. These selfish tendencies go really deep. But then it's really positive as well, because the potential for this radiant Alia, this absolute reality to break through is always there. And in a way, that's who we really are. And the ignorance and the self-centeredness are just like clouds. The sky is always pristine and clear behind the clouds. So that's why I love this model, that it's very, very positive, very optimistic, but it's also realistic. It's saying, no, you do have to work, but also it's saying that the radiance can break through at any moment, at least in glimpses. So that's very, very, for me, very inspiring. I probably haven't been able to articulate it as clearly as I'd like, but I hope that you've had a bit of a sense, at least, of the import of this model. Yeah. So what I'd like us to do now is you could grab a cup of tea, and then I'd like us to go into groups. So let's have we'll have a break, a very short break. Yeah, welcome back. You haven't abandoned us. That's very good. Yeah, so let's see if one or two of you want to share what you have decided to work on. It'd be lovely to hear from all of you. We've only got really time for a couple of people, maybe two or three, but let's just open up and see if there is anybody that wants to share something. that they particularly want to work on. Oh, I've seen Cameron's hand go up.
I think a common thread was noticing what we have resistance to is often what's most valuable, perhaps, in terms of where we need to point our extra effort.
Yeah, and can you say for yourself what that might be?
So I gave the example of I'm coming to the end of my Mitra study course, and I do feel that I could have done more independent study rather than relying on the group night, which I do is a good way for me to learn. In conversation, I learn very well, not so much in reading. But I've been offered an opportunity to rejoin another group on their 3rd and 4th year, so I've kind of been given another go at it, and so really wanting to try to do the independent study more, because looking back, I do regret not staying with the text independently more. Yeah,
that's great, Cameron. That's really good, and great that you're going to have the opportunity to do more of that in a supported way. That's fantastic. Thanks very much. I appreciate you saying that. Yeah. Anybody else? Yes. Who have I got? Yashodata?
Yes, I'll just mention something, because this resonated with more than just me in the group, and that was dealing with a tendency towards perfectionism, and just starting to try and take on board the idea that do things so they're good enough rather than they're perfect, or perfect in one's own view.
Yeah. And is there a particular area of your life that you think that particularly hampers you and that you want to work on?
It's just generally what I do takes quite a lot of time. Although I'm retired, so I've actually got plenty of time. But what this hasn't allowed me space to do is to do nothing very often. I really like doing nothing. But yeah, just starting to program things differently, so there is time to do nothing while still doing things to a reasonable standard, the things which are important to me.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Yashodaka. Anybody else? Oh, Atapriya's got his hand up.
Well, I wonder whether anybody in my group would like to say something. What about you, Anna? Would you like to say something?
I thought you were going to threaten to name somebody. You might even want to say what Anna needs to work on. So no, don't.
That's totally fine.
Anna might not want to.
That's totally fine. I'm happy to talk. No.
Okay, good.
So I was the first one to talk, so I'm always happy to talk, actually.
Oh, good.
Right. So what I said was, I want to work on forming deeper connections of friendship within the Sangha.
Right.
And this is many points, actually, I thought that it relates. So I've been working on my communication recently in the past 3 months.
Yeah.
So I feel like that is the next step in terms of my communication. But as well, there's this view that I have of that I'm alone. So by building, and I think probably a lot of people have that with the lockdown, it just is more difficult to connect to others. So that's where the deeper connection comes in as well.
Yeah, that's really good, Anna. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Anyways.
Very good. Okay, very good. Well, what I'd encourage all of you to do is, if you have identified something, to then, you may not have had time already to think about how you're going to do it. I mean, what changes do you need to make whatever you want happen? How are you going to do it? I mean, another thing that for example, I need to work on is just being a bit more planned and organized and disciplined. And so I've just, I've started using this app called Todoist, and entering my to-do list onto there and trying to, well, I haven't actually been very good at then following it up. So I've entered my tasks, but then I ignore them, and I ignore the Todoist. And I looked at it this morning. I had an email from Todoist, and it gives you karma points. And my karma rating is novice. And you're meant to get up to grandmaster. So I think I need to work on my karma Todoist rating. But anyway, that's just an aside. You could think about, well, what are you actually going to do? What are you actually going to do? Okay, look, I want to move on because I'm aware that there's a couple of questions. Jeanette, where are you, Jeanette? Do you want to wave? Oh yeah, Jeanette, you're waving. That's great. So Jeanette's asked, is the relative alia my alia or our alia? So if I plant a seed, it influences someone else's alia. Yeah, good point, Jeanette. It's not particularly clear, but the relative alia does seem to have some sort of individuation, so that my ethical actions or lack of ethical actions affect my mind stream, and yours will affect your sort of life and mind stream. And then when you get to something like the absolute alia, all those distinctions seem to disappear. It's not that Buddhism says that all is one and that that there's no individuality, but it doesn't say that. It also says that separateness is not absolute. Bhante talks about it as saying not two. It doesn't say all is one, but it does say it's not two. So it's much more mysterious. There is individuality. Your memories and experiences and so forth are yours. They're not going to be the same as mine. Individuality doesn't disappear at enlightenment, and yet lack of the boundaries between us do. So there's something possibly indescribable going on. And I've glanced at the other questions, but I don't know if I'm going to get time to answer them all, because I want to just finish with saying a few things. So I'm sorry if I don't get to all the questions. Annaline's asked something, Martin's asked something. What I want to sort of finish on is, well, that eventually it's said that there is this turning about in the deepest seat of consciousness, as I mentioned. And it's like, it's said that the deepest seat of consciousness, the alia, sort of comes to the fore rather than being hidden behind all these layers of obscurity. The delusions and the egocentric tendencies disappear completely, or they're eradicated at enlightenment. And what's left is this radiant awareness. And in a way, we've now entered, we've gone beyond sort of conceptual language, and it's perhaps more helpful to think in terms of images and imagination. And in a way, imagination is what we've been using all the time. And, when we've been talking about ideas, even that's an imagination, an act of imagination, because it's a model. It's not literal truth. We're trying to imagine what enlightenment is like and what our human predicament is. Also, when we've been talking about friendship and beauty and communication, that's an act of imagination. Imagination is the faculty that responds to value and to meaning, whether that value takes the shape of goodness or truth or beauty. Imagination is a capacity to respond. So as we practice, this faculty of imagination will flourish and deepen and grow and become, as it were, more and more dominant in our experience. When we see the world more in terms of radiance, and when we experience ourselves as more connected, when there's more meta, that's in a way this imaginative faculty coming to the fore. So it's not imagination in this sense, isn't fantasy. Imagination becomes the faculty that realizes the truth, that experiences the truth. And an image that Buddhism uses it for enlightenment is the mandala of the 5 Buddhas. That's one image that's used to describe what the enlightenment experience is. But instead of concepts, it's using this image of a beautiful circle, this beautiful mandala of 5 Buddhas made of lights of different colors, radiant with beautiful, pristine light. At each of the 4 cardinal points of the circle, there's a Buddha, and then in the center of the mandala, there's another Buddha. And this is what consciousness will look like if we experience the deepest, the turning about in the deepest seat of consciousness. So let me just run through the mandala. In the eastern quarter, you've got this radiant blue figure, Attapriya. Are you telling me to speak up? No. You've got this radiant blue Buddha, Akshobhya, and Akshobhya, he, with his right hand, he's touching the earth, or he's sitting on a lotus, he's touching the moon mat. In his left hand, he's holding this golden vajra, like a scepter, a thunderbolt of truth. He's the Buddha of truth, and his mind, his consciousness, his enlightened wisdom is particularly the wisdom that sees everything just as it is, without any conceptual overlay or without any cloud at all, without any distinction between self and other, without any of this delusion. He sees everything in its pristine, utter truth aspect. He's the Buddha of truth. And then moving round, you have Ratnasambhava in the southern quarter, and Ratnasambhava is holding his right hand out outward, his palm facing outward, in a gesture of supreme giving, of generosity. And in his lap, in his left hand, he's holding a jewel, a scintillating jewel, with radiating out all the colors of the rainbow. And the jewel is a symbol for the bodhicitta that is like this force for enlightenment in the world, this force for compassion in the world. And he's the Buddha of beauty, because his wisdom sees everything as beautiful. I mean, it's yesterday I touched on the mandala of aesthetic appreciation. That's Ratnasambhava's realm. He's the Buddha of beauty, of aesthetic appreciation, and that's a way of approaching reality, or a way of conceiving of what reality is. That's what will be our experience if we experience this turning about in the deepest seat of consciousness. And then moving round the mandala, in the western quarter, you have this shining, glowing, beautiful red Buddha. And it's the Buddha Amitabha. His hands are in meditation mudra, in meditation gesture, on his lap in meditation. There's somebody holding up Amitabha Kamalamati is holding. And sometimes he's holding in his lap, resting on his hands, is a lotus flower, a red, beautiful lotus flower, which is exactly what's happening in Kamalamati's image. Thank you, Kamalamati. And he's the Buddha of love. He's the Buddha of metta personified. It's metta personified. And he sees, his wisdom sees everything as individual, as unique. Actually, Ratnasambhava sees everything as equal, as essentially the same. But Amitabha sees everything in its uniqueness. So this goes back to Jeanette's point, where individuality and uniqueness are not obliterated at enlightenment, and yet there's an essential sameness. We're seen as having the same nature, which is shunyata, which is no nature. But Amitabha sees everything in its uniqueness, and what his response is love, is metta. And then moving round further to the northern quarter, you have the Buddha Amoghasiddhi. Amoghasiddhi, his name means infallible success. He's the Buddha of creativity. In his left hand, he holds at his lap a double vajra, a crossed double vajra, golden. And of course, it's all made of light. It's not literally like metallic gold. It's this golden vajra. And in his right hand is raised in the gesture of fearlessness, in the mudra of fearlessness, giving fearlessness, the gift of fearlessness. And he's associated with creativity, with action, and his response is compassion in the world. He acts with compassion, and it's unfailing success in his response. So at the 4 points of the mandala, you have, in a way, 4 aspects of this enlightened mind. What will be freed if we keep practicing. There's truth, and then there's beauty, and then there's love, and then there's creativity. And then in the center of the mandala, you have the Buddha Varochana. The Buddha Varochana is this pristine, glorious white, and Kamalamati is holding up a drawing, a line drawing of Varochana. He is radiantly white, and that means that all the colors are contained within Varochana's wisdom. His wisdom is the wisdom of the Dharma Dhatu, which is the wisdom of reality, which sees ultimate truth, ultimate reality in everything. There is only ultimate truth. In a sense, there is only the potential for enlightenment in everything. Everything is a manifestation of this deeper reality that we've been calling the Alaya. Everything is a manifestation of that. Varochana sees that, and he holds in his hands a shining 8-spoked wheel, the Dharma chakra, in the mudra of teaching. The wheel of the Dharma is what he's turning. He's saying, as it were, the Dharma is everywhere, and he's trying to communicate that. But he encompasses all the wisdoms of the other 4 Buddhas. He above him, though, there's another Buddha. There's another Buddha. So this mandala you could see as a circle in a plane, in a kind of 2-dimensional plane, but in another dimension above all those 5 is the Buddha Vajrasattva. Is the Buddha Vajrasattva. Vajrasattva is said to be the embodiment of all of those other 5, and he particularly, well, he's dressed in the silks and jewels of a bodhisattva. He's said to be like the color of sunlight on snow. So we had some snow today, and we've had some sunlight. I doubt if we've had sunlight on snow, but sometimes you can have this sparkling brilliance. He's surrounded by rainbows. He embodies all those other 5 Buddhas, and in particular, he embodies this innate primordial purity that is our true nature. Beneath all the coverings, beneath the clouds, there is just this pristine sky-like mind. Our true nature is always of the nature of enlightenment. It's pristine, it's pure, it's unsullied and undiminished beneath the clouds. It's not touched by the clouds. The clouds can obscure it, but they can't sully it in any way. Vajrasattva is an embodiment of that purity, that primordial purity that is in all beings, in all things. And Vajrasattva is also associated with death and the opportunity of realization at death that will happen when we let go of the physical body. In a way, it'll be Vajrasattva's light that shines on us, shines forth. It's his radiance that we'll either be able to, as it were, open up to and let go into, or we'll shrink from just at the moment of death. The other jinnas are also said to make an appearance in the bardo, but I want to just end with, in a way, Vajrasattva, because it feels to me, as I was saying, that practice is in a way preparation for death. And this won't be our first death. We've lived, all of us, according to the tradition, we've lived many, many lifetimes, and we have gone through this round of birth and death, often just reinforcing the clouds, as it were, thickening the clouds of delusion and self-centeredness. And partly we've done that out of ignorance, of not knowing that there's another way. In this lifetime, and maybe you've already been practicing the Dharma in previous lifetimes, but certainly in this lifetime, we've come across the Dharma, we've come across a teaching that says, no, there is another way of being, of living, of moving towards something ultimately glorious, ultimately fulfilling, ultimately what the world needs. And if we don't take advantage of that in this lifetime, my own view, and certainly the tradition's view, is that we'll have thrown away a very, very precious gift, a very, very precious opportunity. We won't have made use of this gift. So I really, really want to, if I can leave you with anything, just urge you to, in a way, just redouble your efforts at practice. If you're anything like me, there's room for more. There's more effort that we can make, not in a forced, harsh way. Remember Sona's lute strings; they have to be just right. But even if you're, if for you it's a loosening of the lute strings that's required, well, take note of that. If it's more doing nothing that's required, take note of that. If it's more appreciation of beauty, taking time to do that, becoming receptive to that, then do that. If it's about friendship and going deeper in communication, then do that. Remember that with friendship, we have to take the initiative. Don't be passive about wanting our friends to reach out to us. Take the initiative. Do something that will deepen friendship. If it's about communication, well, do something again about our communication. If it's about generosity and ethics, well, we can take the initiative again. In the end, the Dharma is saying that we have the responsibility for our own minds. Our own minds are our responsibility. Of course, lots of things might have happened to us that aren't our responsibility, aren't our doing. I'm not saying that everything that happens, remember, is the result of our karma, but how we respond to whatever happens to us is our responsibility. And in a way, it's our only freedom. How we respond to things is our only real freedom. So take responsibility for our minds. Often we take responsibility for other areas in our life, but not our minds. And Buddhism saying that is the real transformative potential that we've got, is to take responsibility for our own minds and work on freeing our minds freeing our minds from the obscuration of those clouds, and recognizing the real potential that we have, which is symbolized in this mandala of 6 Buddhas, you could say. So I want to leave you with just that image of the radiant Buddhas in a clear blue sky, and really wish you well for well, coming out of this retreat, and hopefully coming out of lockdown at some point, and getting on with your practice. Okay, I'm going to hand back to Vidyasaki now.